We begin tonight with a developing story that continues to dominate headlines across the United States. Just hours ago, the Los Angeles District Attorney and LAPD held a joint press conference, officially announcing first-degree murder charges in the deaths of legendary Hollywood filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife, photographer and producer Michele Reiner. Authorities confirmed that their 32-year-old son, Nick Reiner, is now in custody, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, including allegations of multiple killings and the use of a deadly weapon. This comes as new surveillance and street videos were released yesterday, obtained by the New York Post and ABC News, showing Nick Reiner calmly walking near his parents' home hours before the alleged murders, later purchasing a drink at a gas station, and finally surrendering peacefully to police without resistance. At the same time, another major development emerged. High-profile defense attorney Alan Jackson, known for representing some of the most controversial defendants in recent years, has officially taken on Nick Reiner's defense. Jackson confirmed that his client was not medically cleared to appear in court, delaying his first appearance. Police and prosecutors are now urging the public to rely only on verified information, as rumors and unconfirmed reports continue to spread online while the investigation remains active. Tonight, we break down what authorities have confirmed, what the newly released videos appear to show, and what legal experts say could shape one of the most shocking family homicide cases Hollywood has ever seen. By the time officials stepped into the briefing room, the story had already consumed the country. For days, rumors had circulated. Headlines hinted at a tragedy too disturbing to fully comprehend, a Hollywood power couple found dead, and their own son at the center of the investigation. But until this moment, nothing had been officially confirmed. That changed when the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office and the Los Angeles Police Department faced the cameras together. District Attorney Nathan Hochman stood at the podium, flanked by senior law enforcement leaders. Behind him were members of the Robbery Homicide Division, the same detectives who had worked nearly non-stop since the bodies were discovered. Before taking a single question, Hochman made it clear that what was being announced would redefine the case. His office, he said, was formally filing criminal charges against Nick Reiner, the 32-year-old son of Rob Reiner, and Michele Reiner. The charges were severe. Nick Reiner now faces 2 counts of first-degree murder, each carrying the most serious penalties allowed under California law. Prosecutors also filed a special circumstance allegation of multiple murders, a legal designation reserved for the gravest homicide cases. In addition, they alleged that Reiner personally used a dangerous and deadly weapon, identified as a knife. These allegations elevate the case into a category that could result in life imprisonment without the possibility of parole or potentially the death penalty. However, Hochman emphasized that no decision regarding capital punishment has yet been made. Then came a deliberate pause. The district attorney leaned forward and addressed what he knew would become the central tension of the case: public judgment versus legal process. These are charges, he said. He reminded viewers that in the American justice system, the burden rests entirely on the prosecution to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, a standard that must be met unanimously by 12 jurors in a court of law. Anything else, he warned: speculation, anonymous sources, leaked rumors, risks distorting the truth. Hochman went on to acknowledge the emotional gravity of the case. Prosecuting crimes involving family members, he explained, are among the most painful cases his office handles. They involve not only violence, but betrayal, intimacy, and devastation that reaches far beyond the courtroom. Rob Reiner, he said, was more than a famous name. He was an iconic figure in American film and television, a director, actor, and cultural force whose work shaped generations. Michele Reiner, he added, was an accomplished photographer and producer in her own right, respected within the creative community. Standing beside him, LAPD Chief Jim McDonnell confirmed that officers first responded to the Reiner residence after a request for assistance from the Los Angeles Fire Department. Once inside, officers quickly recognized that they were dealing with a potential homicide. The case was immediately transferred to the Robbery Homicide Division, triggering an intensive investigation involving forensic teams, detectives, and federal task force assistants. McDonnell praised the investigators for what he described as round-the-clock work, emphasizing that the charges announced that day were the result of evidence gathered carefully and methodically. Still, both officials repeatedly stressed restraint. Because the investigation remains active, authorities decline to reveal the exact cause of death, the precise time of death, details of forensic evidence, or any statements allegedly made by the accused. Questions about motive, mental health, and substance use were deflected, with officials insisting that such matters would be addressed only in court at the appropriate time. Before stepping away, Hochman issued a final warning to the public. He urged people not to rely on social media speculation or tabloid narratives, noting that much of what circulates in the early days of a case is incomplete or simply wrong. Only information released by the District Attorney's Office, the Los Angeles Police Department, the Coroner's Office, or the courtroom itself should be treated as reliable. As the press conference ended and cameras cut away, the reality set in. This was no longer just a shocking Hollywood tragedy. It was now a formal murder prosecution, one that would unfold slowly, publicly, and under intense national scrutiny, and the case had only just begun. While officials were careful about what they revealed, the timeline of events that led police to the Reiner home would soon become the next critical piece of the puzzle. The call that set everything in motion did not come from police. According to officials, on the afternoon of Sunday, December 14th, the Los Angeles Fire Department was the first to respond to the Reiner residence located on a quiet, upscale street in Brentwood, one of Los Angeles's most exclusive neighborhoods. Fire personnel quickly realized that this was not a routine medical call. They requested immediate assistance from the Los Angeles Police Department. When officers from the LAPD West Los Angeles Division entered the home, what they found would transform the situation into one of the most disturbing homicide investigations the city had seen in years. Inside the residence, officers discovered the bodies of Rob Reiner and Michele Reiner. At that moment, the scene was classified as a death investigation, but that designation would not last long. Experienced officers recognized signs that raised serious concern, prompting them to notify the Robbery Homicide Division, LAPD's elite unit responsible for the city's most complex and violent crimes. Within hours, homicide detectives had taken control of the scene. As detectives arrived, the Brentwood property was sealed. Police tape went up. Patrol cars lined the street. Neighbors watched quietly from behind closed doors as forensic teams moved in and out of the residence. According to authorities, no one was seen entering or leaving the home after police cleared the scene early the following morning, a detail later confirmed by reporters monitoring the property. From the outside, the house looked unchanged. Inside, detectives were beginning the painstaking process of reconstructing what had happened. Despite the immediate public interest, law enforcement officials remained unusually tight-lipped. At the press conference, police confirmed only the most basic facts. 2 victims were found deceased inside the residence. The deaths were being investigated as a homicide. Detectives were working urgently to establish a timeline. They did not disclose the cause of death, the time of death, the location of the bodies within the home, or the presence of any potential weapon. Officials emphasized that the coroner's examination would be critical in determining those details. While police have not publicly detailed what evidence was uncovered inside the house, investigators acknowledged that the focus of the investigation shifted quickly. Rather than searching for an unknown intruder, detectives began examining the victim's immediate circle, a standard procedure in domestic homicide investigations. By that evening, authorities would confirm that they were actively searching for Nick Reiner the couple's 32-year-old son. The investigation, once centered on a home, had now expanded across the city. News of the deaths spread rapidly. In Brentwood, neighbors described the Reiners as a private family in a tightly knit neighborhood. Few could comprehend how such violence could occur inside a home associated with stability, success, and decades of public admiration. As daylight faded, the presence of law enforcement remained constant. Behind the closed doors of the Reiner residence, detectives continued gathering evidence that would soon lead them to a suspect no one expected. As investigators worked inside the Brentwood home, a parallel operation was already underway, one focused not on where the crime occurred, but on who had left the scene. And by nightfall, police would make a move that would shock the nation. While detectives worked quietly inside the Brentwood home, another operation was already unfolding across Los Angeles. According to law enforcement officials, investigators began narrowing their focus early. In homicide cases involving family members, detectives often look inward before they look outward, carefully examining the closest relationships to the victims. In this case, that process moved quickly. By the late afternoon of December 14th, police were actively searching for Nick Reiner, the 32-year-old son of Rob Reiner and Michele Singer Reiner. Authorities have not publicly detailed what evidence triggered that shift, but officials later confirmed that the investigation rapidly centered on him. As evening approached, alerts went out across multiple units. Detectives from the Robbery Homicide Division coordinated with patrol officers and federal task force partners. The objective was not only to locate Nick Reiner, but to do so safely without escalating a situation already marked by extraordinary violence. What police found was unexpected. Nick Reiner was not hiding inside a residence. He was not attempting to flee the state. He was not engaged in a standoff. Instead, officers located him walking openly in a public area near Exposition Park, close to the University of Southern California campus. The contrast was striking. Here was a man now accused of one of the most disturbing crimes imaginable, yet, according to police, he appeared outwardly calm as officers approached him. LAPD later confirmed that the arrest happened without incident. Reiner complied with commands. He did not resist. He did not attempt to run. There was no struggle, no dramatic confrontation, no visible panic. Officers took him into custody, calmly and methodically, then transported him for processing. In the hours that followed this detail, the absence of chaos would take on outsized significance. As news of the arrest broke, questions immediately surfaced. How could someone allegedly involved in such a brutal crime appear so composed in public? What had he been doing in the hours between the deaths and his arrest? And what did his behavior mean, legally and psychologically? Police, however, offered few answers. Authorities declined to say whether Reiner made any statements during or after his arrest. They refused to discuss evidence recovered at the time, stressing that premature disclosures could compromise the integrity of the case. What they did confirm was the speed. In less than 24 hours from the initial discovery at the Brentwood home, investigators had identified, located, and arrested a suspect. Within another day, the district attorney's office would announce formal charges. For a double homicide involving high-profile victims, it was a remarkably fast progression. As night fell across Los Angeles, Nick Reiner remained in custody. He would not appear in court immediately. As his defense attorney later confirmed, he was undergoing medical clearance, a standard procedure, but one that added another layer of mystery. Behind closed doors, prosecutors were already preparing for what they knew would be a historic case. A specialized team was assembled reflecting both the seriousness of the charges and the scrutiny the case would face. At the same time, the defense moved swiftly. Within days, it became clear that Nick Reiner would not be facing these allegations alone. One of the most prominent defense attorneys in the country had stepped in, signaling that the legal battle ahead would be fierce, technical, and closely watched. Yet even as lawyers prepared their strategies, public attention began shifting elsewhere. because while police and prosecutors were careful with their words, the images were about to speak for themselves. Newly released video footage, captured on sidewalks, inside a convenience store, and on a city street during the arrest, would soon flood television screens and social media feeds. And those images would complicate everything. They would challenge assumptions, they would fuel debate, and they would become central to one of the most critical questions in the case. Not just what happened, but what Nick Reiner understood before, during, and after the alleged murders. As investigators continued building their case behind the scenes, the public would soon see what detectives already had: video evidence showing Nick Reiner in the hours surrounding the alleged crime. And once those videos surfaced, the narrative would shift yet again. For days, authorities had been careful with their words, but then the images appeared. Within hours, clips released by major media outlets began circulating, videos that placed Nick Reiner in public view during the critical window surrounding the alleged murders. And almost instantly, those images began shaping how the public interpreted the case. The first video, obtained by the New York Post, shows Nick Reiner walking along a sidewalk near his parents' home. The footage was recorded just hours before the killings, according to the outlet. There is nothing dramatic in the scene. For those only listening, the image is simple: a man walking alone, a bag slung over his left shoulder, moving at a steady pace. He passes a gas station. He wears a hat. He does not appear rushed. He does not appear agitated. He does not appear lost or disoriented. Most striking to many observers is what the video does not show. There is no visible panic, no erratic movement, no outward sign of emotional collapse. To the casual viewer, he looks, for lack of a better word, normal. Shortly after that footage aired, a second video surfaced, this time from ABC News. The clip shows Nick Reiner inside a convenience store, reportedly after the murders and shortly before his arrest. Again, the scene is quiet. He browses. He purchases a drink. He appears aware of his surroundings. Once more, commentators noted the same thing. There is no obvious sign of chaos. Then came the third video, also released by the New York Post. This footage captures the moment police took Nick Reiner into custody on a Los Angeles street. While the images are partially obstructed, what is visible is telling. Officers surround him calmly. Weapons are not raised. There is no scramble, no shouting, no physical struggle. Law enforcement would later confirm what the video suggested. Nick Reiner surrendered peacefully and was taken into custody without resistance. As these videos replayed across television screens and social media platforms, they ignited immediate debate. Some viewers argued that the footage suggested awareness, control, and deliberation. Others cautioned that appearances can be deceiving, especially when mental illness or substance abuse may be involved. Legal analysts were quick to weigh in. In California, they explained, insanity is not determined by whether someone looks disturbed, emotional, or even irrational. The state follows a strict legal standard, one that asks a narrower question. Did the defendant understand the nature and quality of his actions? And did he know right from wrong? Under that framework, behavior before and after an alleged crime can become critically important. Calm, goal-directed actions, walking, shopping, complying with police, are often cited by prosecutors as evidence of awareness. But defense attorneys counter that mental illness and drug use do not always present in obvious or visible ways. Those realities, while not yet confirmed by official forensic reports, loom over the case like an unspoken shadow. For now, the defense remains silent beyond procedural statements. Prosecutors remain restrained, releasing only what is necessary. Between them stands a legal system preparing to examine one of the most disturbing questions it can face. When does illness excuse responsibility, and when does it not? As lawyers prepare for that fight, investigators are still waiting on key forensic answers. Answers that could lock the timeline into place and determine how the story inside the Brentwood home truly unfolded. As attorneys prepared for what would become a prolonged legal battle, investigators were still waiting on the most critical pieces of the puzzle, the forensic findings that would establish when, how, and possibly why the killings occurred. From the very beginning, officials made it clear that time would be a central issue in this case. According to authorities, the bodies of Rob Reiner and Michele Reiner were discovered on the afternoon of Sunday, December 14th, after the Los Angeles Fire Department responded to the Brentwood residence. What happened in the hours, or possibly the night before that discovery remains one of the most closely guarded aspects of the investigation. At the press conference, law enforcement declined to provide a specific time of death. They emphasized that the coroner's examination would be essential in narrowing the window and that such determinations can take time, particularly in complex cases involving multiple victims. Until that process is complete, the official timeline remains incomplete. That uncertainty has left room for speculation, something authorities have repeatedly warned against. Various media outlets have published conflicting accounts about when the killings may have occurred, whether the victims were asleep, and what transpired inside the home. Officials have not confirmed any of those details, stressing that early reporting in high-profile cases is often inaccurate or premature. What investigators have acknowledged is that reconstructing the timeline will require more than forensic analysis alone. Detectives are examining phone records, movement data, and surveillance footage from the surrounding area. They are working to determine who was present at the home, who came and went, and what communications occurred before and after the deaths. Every minute matters. In cases like this, timelines do more than establish sequence. They test credibility, they confirm or contradict alibis, and they can either reinforce or undermine theories of intent. At the same time, forensic evidence is expected to play a decisive role. The district attorney has alleged that a knife was used in the killings, but officials have not yet confirmed where that weapon was found or how it was linked to the suspect. Such information, they say, will be introduced in court, not through press briefings. Autopsy results are also pending. Those findings are expected to clarify the cause of death, the nature of the injuries, and whether there are signs of struggle or defensive wounds. Each detail carries weight, not only for prosecutors building their case, but for the defense preparing its response. Beyond the physical evidence, investigators are also piecing together the broader context. They are examining the dynamics inside the household, the relationships between family members, and any recent conflicts that may have occurred. Authorities have acknowledged that family homicides often involve long simmering tensions rather than sudden isolated acts. Still, they have cautioned that motive is rarely as simple as it appears from the outside. For now, much of what happened inside the Brentwood home remains sealed behind investigative silence. What is clear is that the timeline, once fully established, will either connect the dots cleanly or expose gaps that must be explained. Until then, both sides wait. Prosecutors wait for forensic clarity, defense attorneys wait for evidence they can challenge, and the public waits for answers that, so far, remain just out of reach. As the case moves toward arraignment and eventually trial, the focus will shift from investigation to accountability, from what might have happened to what can be proven. And for a family once known for creativity, success, and public admiration, the final chapter will be written not in Hollywood, but in a courtroom. This will be a trial where the law, not public emotion, determines the outcome. At the heart of it all lies a question that cannot be answered quickly or comfortably. How does a family reach a point where such violence becomes possible? That question may never have a single clean answer. Courts can determine guilt or innocence. They can impose punishment or acquittal, but they cannot fully explain the human fracture that leads to tragedy inside a home. For now, much remains unresolved. The final forensic reports have not yet been released. The complete timeline has not yet been confirmed. Motive, if one exists, has not been formally presented, and the voices that matter most, those of witnesses and experts, have yet to be heard under oath. What is certain is that this case will unfold slowly, deliberately, and under intense national scrutiny. Every hearing will be watched, every filing will be analyzed, every new detail will be weighed for meaning. And as that process continues, officials have urged the public to resist speculation, to rely only on verified information, and to remember that justice is not instantaneous. It is methodical. Rob Reiner and Michele Reiner were figures known for their creativity, their influence, and their place in American cultural life. Now, their names are tied to a case defined not by achievement, but by loss. The allegations surrounding their deaths are severe. The legal process ahead is complex, and the outcome remains uncertain. What lies ahead is not a media spectacle, but a courtroom reckoning, one governed by evidence, law, and the presumption of innocence. As this case moves forward, the story will no longer be shaped by rumor or footage alone, but by testimony, forensic proof, and the judgment of a jury. Until then, the only responsible conclusion is patience, because in the justice system, truth is not declared, it is proven. If you want continued coverage based only on verified court proceedings and official updates, subscribe and follow as this case develops.